Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something core to, well, all of us, habits, why we do the things we do automatically day in, day out.
Yeah, and maybe how we can nudge those patterns a little. It's fascinating, isn't it? You feel like you're making choices all day long.
Right. What am I going to eat? Should I check my phone?
Exactly. But, a huge chunk of that isn't really deciding. It's habit. People noticed this way back, even William James in the 1890s.
And the sources we dug into for this dive really hammer that home. These little things, grabbing coffee first thing, how you react to stress, even tiny things like how often you exercise, they seem small.
But they add up massively. They shape our health, our finances, productivity, happiness, pretty much everything over time.
So our goal here is to unpack the science from all this material. How do habits actually work in the brain? And crucially, what are the practical takeaways?
Okay, so where do we start? If they're automatic, what's the underlying mechanism?
The central idea that comes up again and again in the research is this thing called the neurological habit loop.
And maybe the best way to get our heads around that is through this incredible story of a man named Eugene Pauly, or EP.
Right, EP. He had this severe illness, viral encephalitis, back in the 90s, and it basically wiped out the parts of his brain responsible for memory completely.
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't hold on to new information for more than like a few seconds. He'd ask the same question again and again. It was profound memory loss.
But then his wife, Beverly, noticed something odd. When he was home, he'd get up, go cook himself bacon and eggs, eat them, go back to bed.
And then, like less than an hour later, he'd do the exact same thing again. No memory of having just eaten.
Yeah.
He also started taking these walks around the block.
And somehow finding his way back, even though he couldn't draw you a map of his own house.
So researchers looked at his brain scans, memory centers, destroyed. But this other area, the basal ganglia, was basically untouched.
And they started thinking, wait a minute, maybe this part handles automatic behaviors, habits, operating totally separate from conscious memory.
Exactly. Because Eugene could learn new routes, like how to find the kitchen, even though he couldn't tell you he'd learned anything.
So that led to this model, the habit loop. Simple, 3 steps.
Cue, routine, reward. Think about those lab rats. They hear a click, that's the cue.
They run through a maze, the routine.
To get a piece of chocolate, the reward.
And the brain scans are wild, right? Big spike of activity for the cue, the click, another big spike for the reward, the chocolate.
But during the maze run, once the rat knew it, brain activity just calmed right down, almost silent.
Which is kind of the whole point of habits, yeah. They save mental energy.
Totally. Driving a car is the classic example. At first, it's all hands on deck, mentally, super focused.
Checking mirrors, thinking about the pedals, steering.
But after a while, you just do it. The cue getting in the car triggers the routine, gets you the reward arriving somewhere. Your brain can think about other stuff.
And the flip side, if that basal ganglia is damaged.
People can become almost mentally paralyzed, can't make simple decisions, get overwhelmed by tiny details. It shows how much we rely on these unconscious genes.
So Eugene's case was massive because he could form new habits without any memory of doing so. It proved this loop was real and separate.
Okay, so cue, routine, reward. Makes sense. Things become automatic. But what actually pushes us through that loop? What's the fuel?
Ah, okay, yeah. That's the next critical piece from the research. Craving. It's not just a mechanical loop. It's driven by desire.
Often unconscious desire, right, for the reward.
And the story everyone points to here is Claude Hopkins and Pepsodent toothpaste. Way back when.
Yeah, early 20th century. Brushing teeth, not really a thing. Most people didn't bother. Even dental experts were like, toothpaste doesn't do much.
So Hopkins, this ad legend, had to sell toothpaste to people who had zero habit of using it.
His genius move was tapping into a craving. He didn't invent a need. He found a cue everyone had, but ignored that slightly filmy feeling on your teeth.
His ads literally said, just run your tongue across your teeth, you'll feel a film. Simple, universal cue.
And the reward, also simple. Beautiful teeth. A great smile.
But the key was creating the craving for the feeling of clean teeth after brushing. That smooth feeling became proof the routine worked. Proof you were getting closer to that beautiful smile reward.
And that craving, linked to the film cue and the beauty reward, powered the brushing routine. Pepsodent became huge.
So his formula, simple cue, clear reward, and crucially, creating a craving for that reward feeling.
We see it over and over. Febreze is another great example from the material.
Right, it initially flopped when they marketed it as just getting rid of bad smells.
Because people get used to smells in their own homes. There wasn't a consistent cue, and honestly, who craves scentlessness?
So they shifted. Marketed it as the final touch after you finish cleaning.
Yep.
Cue, finishing tidying up, reward, that little burst of pleasant scent.
And the craving became for that satisfying smell that signals, job done, it's clean and smells nice. Sales went through the roof.
They even saw this craving neurologically, right, with Julio the monkey.
Yeah, researchers watched Julio's brain. When he saw the cue for juice, his brain lit up with anticipation of the craving before he even got the juice. If the juice didn't come, you saw frustration signals.
So the craving kicks in before the routine. It's the engine.
Exactly. And understanding that craving, what you're really seeking when that cue hits, is key to changing the habit, even if you're not consciously aware of the craving itself.
Okay, so we've got the loop, cue, routine, reward. We know craving powers it. How do we actually fiddle with this thing? How do we change a habit we don't like?
Well, the golden rule that emerges from all this is kind of simple but powerful. Keep the cue, keep the reward, but change the routine.
Don't try to eliminate the habit entirely, replace the middle part.
Right. And Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, is maybe the most profound example. Bill Wilson, the co-founder, knew alcoholism inside out.
He had cues, right? Stress, anxiety, social situations maybe. The routine was drinking. The reward was relief, escape, feeling different.
AA works, as the sources describe it, because it provides a substitute routine for the drinking. The cues are still there. Life still throws stress at you. The desire for relief, the reward, is still there.
But instead of drinking, the routine becomes going to a meeting, calling your sponsor, sharing, doing service work.
These new routines deliver a similar reward connection, relief, coping, but through a healthier pathway. It attacks the habit loop.
You see the same thing in like habit reversal therapy for nail biting or skin picking.
Exactly. Identify the cue. Maybe it's a feeling of tension in your fingers or boredom. Identify the reward, a little physical stimulation, a sense of, completeness.
And then when the cue hits, you consciously do something else with your hands, a competing response.
Put them in your pockets, grab a pencil, clench your fist. Anything that replaces the biting routine but addresses the cue. Awareness is the first step. You got to know when the urge hits.
It's like making the new thing automatic, like Tony Dungy did with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers football team.
Oh yeah, they were famously bad. Stuck in a losing habit.
Dungy's whole thing wasn't fancy plays. It was drilling basic responses over and over and over.
So players wouldn't think, they'd just react automatically to the cues on the field. He wanted to make the right routine second nature, replacing hesitation or bad habits.
Like that player, Regan Upshaw. Snap count happens. Cue. He doesn't freeze or overthink. He just explodes off the line. New automatic routine. Makes the play.
And this is a really crucial addition from the research, just swapping the routine often isn't enough for it to stick long term, especially under pressure.
Right, you need something else.
Belief. You have to actually believe the new routine will work, that change is possible.
And that often comes from a group, a community.
Yeah, that seems to be a huge factor.
Yeah.
In AA, belief grows as people see others succeeding, share their struggles, feel part of something. With Dungy's team, they started believing in his system and each other because they saw it working. That belief cemented the change.
So for someone listening, it's not just about finding a new routine. You need the plan, yes, but you also need to foster that belief, maybe by connecting with others.
That dramatically ups the odds, according to this work. Find your tribe, find your support.
That feels less daunting than just trying to willpower your way through everything alone.
Definitely. Which actually leads nicely into this other concept, keystone habits.
Ah, okay. What's a keystone habit?
It's like one specific habit that when you change it, starts a chain reaction. Doesn't just alter that one behavior, it ripples out and transforms other patterns too.
And the big story here is Paul O'Neill at Alcoa, the aluminum company.
Right. 1987, he takes over. Alcoa's struggling. Wall Street expects him to talk profits, restructuring, the usual CEO stuff.
Instead, his first big speech, all about worker safety, nothing else.
People were stunned. Investors were like, what is this guy doing? They nearly revolted.
But O'Neill knew safety was a potential keystone. Why? Because to make the plants fundamentally safer, you couldn't just add safety railings.
You had to understand why accidents happened, which meant you had to improve communication between workers and management. You had to fix broken manufacturing processes. You had to improve training. You needed unions and executives working together.
So focusing intensely on that one thing, safety forced changes across the entire organization's routines.
And the results were incredible. Yes, injuries plummeted, making Alcoa one of the safest companies. But because they fixed all those underlying processes,
efficiency went up, quality improved.
Massively. Profits soared. Fixing the safety habit, fixed the company. It was the keystone.
Wow. Are there other examples, like on a personal level?
Yeah, the research mentions things like food journaling. Just the simple act of writing down what you eat, that's the habit change.
You're not even told to eat differently necessarily.
Exactly. But that one habit often leads people to naturally start making healthier choices, changing other eating habits, maybe exercising more. It triggers awareness and further changes. Or look at West Point, they don't have a class called Grit 101. Grit emerges as a byproduct of all the other daily habits they instill in cadets: discipline, routine, overcoming challenges. Those are the keystones.
So the message is, find one strategic domino to push over. Don't try to change everything at once.
That seems to be a really powerful lever for change, yeah. Identify a potential keystone.
Okay, so we've talked about changing habits, keystone habits. What about willpower itself? Is it just something you have or don't have?
The research suggests it's more like a muscle. It gets tired, but you can also strengthen it. And using willpower is itself a kind of habit.
Is this the cookie experiment?
That's the famous one, yeah. Radishes versus cookies. Students who had to use willpower to resist fresh-baked cookies and eat radishes instead.
They basically used up their willpower fuel for a bit.
Right, they gave up faster on difficult puzzles afterward compared to students who didn't have to resist the cookies. Their willpower muscle was fatigued.
But you can strengthen it.
Yes. Studies show that people who committed to a new habit requiring self-control, like an exercise program or a money management plan, didn't just get better at that thing.
Their willpower improved in other unrelated areas too, like eating better or procrastinating less.
Exactly. Strengthening the muscle in one area carried over. It's a transferable skill, almost.
And companies like Starbucks actually train for this.
Yeah. They realized barista burnout and bad customer interactions often happened when willpower failed under stress. So they developed specific routines for employees.
Like the LAT method for dealing with angry customers.
Right. Listen, apologize, thank, tell, explain. It's a habit loop. Cue, angry customer, routine, LAT method, reward, diffuse situation, feeling capable. It makes exercising willpower automatic when stress hits.
That makes sense. And this idea of routines applies not just to individuals, but whole organizations, right?
Absolutely. Researchers Nelson and Winter talked about organizational routines, the established ways companies get things done, and also truces.
Truces, like office politics.
Sort of. The unwritten rules, the informal agreements, the power balances between departments that dictate how work actually flows or doesn't flow. These become organizational habits.
Efficient sometimes, maybe, but they can also make companies really rigid.
Hugely resistant to change. Everyone sticks to their routine, their turf. And that can be dangerous.
The London Underground fire, that was a chilling example in the material.
Devastating. So many things went wrong because of ingrained dysfunctional habits. Ticket clerks who only sold tickets and wouldn't help evacuate. Departments not sharing information. Fire plans locked away. No single person having overall authority in the station.
Each part followed its routine, its truce, and the result was tragedy.
It highlights how these routines, meant for efficiency, can prevent effective action in a crisis.
So what breaks these bad organizational habits?
Often it takes a crisis, a real shock to the system. The fire forced massive changes on the underground. Similarly, that awful case at Rhode Island Hospital where a surgeon operated on the wrong side of a patient's head.
That spurred huge changes in their surgical safety protocols and communication habits.
Crises create urgency. They shatter the complacency of existing routines and make people accept that change has to happen. Wise leaders, the sources suggest, can sometimes even leverage a perceived crisis to create that same window for change.
So for us, it's realizing our environment, including work habits, impacts our own willpower. And sometimes big shifts require a jolt.
Yeah, and that environment is also being actively shaped by others who understand these habit loops, often for commercial reasons.
Okay, now we're getting into the predicting and influencing part, the Target story.
Yes. Slightly creepy, but fascinating. Target figured out how to predict pregnancy.
Not just if someone was pregnant, but even estimate their due date based purely on buying habits.
Yeah, by analyzing purchases, not just diapers and wipes, but combinations of things like unscented lotions, specific vitamin supplements, cotton balls, washcloths. Patterns emerged.
Okay, predicting is one thing, but how do you use that information without, freaking people out?
All right, you can't just send a flyer saying congrats on the baby. That's the spooking problem.
So what did they do?
They camouflaged it. They put coupons for baby stuff diapers, formula inside mailers that also had totally random ads.
Like for lawnmowers or wine glasses or something?
Exactly. Things the customer normally bought or might expect to see ads for. It made the baby stuff seem less targeted, more random. It leveraged the brain's preference for the familiar to sneak the new stuff in.
Wow. That's clever. And it's similar to how radio stations get us to, like, new songs.
Same principle. You sandwich the unfamiliar new song between two massive, well-loved hits. The familiarity and positive association of the hits bleeds over, making you more receptive to the new track. It hijacks that comfort zone in our brains.
Okay, so companies are analyzing and shaping our habits. What about social habits? How do groups influence us?
Habits are intensely social. Think about the Montgomery bus boycott.
Rosa Parks. Her arrest was the spark.
Yes, but why did it ignite so powerfully? Because she had deep roots, strong ties in many different community groups. Church, NAACP, social clubs.
So word spread really fast through those close connections.
Exactly. But what made it a mass movement involving people who didn't even know her personally was the power of weak ties.
Weak ties, like acquaintances.
Yeah. People heard about the boycott plan from friends of friends, from members of other groups they were loosely connected to. These weak ties bridged different social circles, creating widespread awareness and, crucially, peer pressure, a sense of everyone is doing this, I should too.
So it takes both strong and weak ties to mobilize something big like that.
It seems so. And you see organizations intentionally fostering social habits. Saddleback Church is given as an example.
They grew incredibly fast. How did habits play a role?
They deliberately created structures like small study groups with built-in social habits, shared activities, specific ways of interacting, mutual support. These recipes, as the source called them, created strong bonds and made participation feel natural and expected.
It becomes self-reinforcing. The group habit keeps people engaged.
And leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., he didn't just give speeches. He cultivated new shared habits within the civil rights movement.
Like the habit of nonviolent resistance, even when provoked.
Precisely. That became a core routine, a shared identity marker. It turned passive followers into active participants who embodied the movement's principles through their actions, their habits.
So our social circles are constantly nudging our habits, and companies are watching our patterns. It really makes you think about choice.
Exactly. If habits are this powerful, this automatic, driven by cravings, reinforced by social pressure, how much free will do we actually have?
It's the big question lurking underneath all of this.
The material looks at really tough cases. Brian Thomas, the man who tragically killed his wife during a sleep terror. An unconscious pattern, a sort of habit, took over completely.
Compared to someone like Angie Bachman, the gambling addict, she lost everything. Casinos even flew her in, gave her perks.
But she was aware, right? She knew she had a gambling habit. She knew the consequences. That's the crucial difference the sources seem to draw.
Thomas had no awareness of the pattern driving his actions in that moment. Bachman did.
And the implication is, once you become aware of a habit loop, the cue, the routine, the reward, the craving, you gain a degree of responsibility. Because change is possible. Others have overcome even profound addictions.
It brings us back to William James again, doesn't it? Cultivating the will to believe you can change.
James saw habits brilliantly, not as chains, but as things that make difficult actions easier with practice. They become semi-automatic, freeing up your conscious mind for other things.
So by deliberately choosing and practicing new habits.
We are actively sculpting who we become. We're programming our own automaticity.
And that framework we talked about, identify the routine, experiment with rewards, isolate the cue, have a plan that's like the user manual for doing it.
It's presented as a practical method, yeah. Grounded in understanding how these loops actually work. Not magic, but a process.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We really have. From the basic brain loop in Eugene Pauly's story,
to how cravings sell toothpaste and air freshener,
to the golden rule of changing habits, keeping the cue and reward, swapping the routine seen in AA and therapy, and even coaching football teams.
Plus the vital role of belief, often sparked by community.
Then, keystone habits like Alcoa's safety focus, triggering huge cascades of change.
Willpower as a muscle, something trainable, and how companies like Starbucks turn it into a routine.
And those organizational habits, the routines and truces that run companies, sometimes needing a crisis to break the bad ones.
Not forgetting how companies like Target predict our behavior by analyzing our purchase habits.
And how our social connections, both strong and weak, drive everything from boycotts to church growth.
The big takeaway, threading through all these sources, seems to be habits are fundamental. They run so much of our lives, often beneath our awareness.
They are incredibly powerful forces, absolutely,
Hmm.
shaping individuals, organizations, even societies.
But, and this is the hopeful part, they aren't destiny. Because they follow understandable patterns, they can be changed.
They can be understood, redesigned, replaced. We have more agency than we might think once we grasp the mechanics.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. Think about one habit in your own life, something you do automatically, maybe something you wish you didn't or something you wish you did.
Using this loop idea, cue, routine, reward, craving which part feels hardest to get a handle on for that specific habit. Is it figuring out the real cue or understanding the craving underneath?
Or maybe just identifying a workable alternative routine. What's one tiny experiment you could try this week? Just a small tweak when the cue hits.
And thinking about belief and community, is there anyone you could connect with, a friend, a group, online or offline, who might provide that support or shared experience to help make a change actually stick this time?